So, hello everybody, welcome back for the first session with presentations. In this session on communication, we'll have some really interesting talks. Communication, of course, is the key to impact. So it's really important to know how to communicate and when to communicate. And I wonder what kind of tips and ideas we are going to take home from this session. First, I'd like to start with Andrea Aldas Vargas. She's a PhD student, am I right? Postdoc. Oh, I'm sorry. Postdoc at University of Wageningen. And she's going to share some experiences with the remediation results of the Griffpark in Utrecht. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks for the nice introduction. Good morning, everybody. I will indeed talk about the use of nature-based solutions for urban groundwater remediation. And this is a case study in the Griffpark. So to give a bit of an introduction, the Griffpark is a historically polluted location. So in the past, there were 3 gas plants there, and these gas plants operated until the 70s, and therefore they leave a bit of contamination. And for that reason is why in the 90s there were cement bentonite walls built around the park to contain the spreading of this pollution. And another measure that was taken was that the polluted groundwater is now transported to a wastewater treatment plant. But of course, this pump and treat is not a very sustainable solution, and that is how now, instead of humans helping nature to recover, we want to work together with nature. And in the light of that vision of humans working together with nature, then the Best Park project started already in year 2017. And this and part of the Best Park project consists of researcher groups with people from Wageningen University, University Utrecht, Delta. Oh. Okay.
They are being notified that there is nobody online.
Okay. Okay, this, as I was saying, part of the Best Park group consists of a group of researchers from Wageningen University, University Utrecht, but also Deltares. And the idea is that we as researchers want to come up with innovative solutions. And these innovative solutions also consist on pilots, and these pilots will help first to prevent the spreading contamination, but also to remediate the existing pollution. So the idea is to use the potential of indigenous bacteria in the Griffpark. And that is something that we, of course, want to communicate to the public. And one of the challenges we have is that I was talking about groundwater. So of course, groundwater we cannot see. So that is a bit difficult when compared, for instance, with the landscape restoration or things that you can look with your naked eye. So I wanted to use as an example this poster that was, it belongs to the UN, and it was created or promoted for the 22nd of March. That was the World Water Day. And I liked very much the slogan that was about making the invisible visible. And that's also what we would like to do, of course, with the Griffpark remediation plan. So in order to showcase such a project, it is very important to first have trust of the citizens and all the park users and the people who live around the Griffpark, of course, and that is something that the municipality has been already working on. And for that, then they had really open communication, and this implies not only delivering information, but also having discussions and sessions where people could bring up also problems, and the idea was to, together with the citizens, solve some of the problems, and this brings to the ideal situation where there is collaboration, and within the collaboration then we expect that the execution of the project is successful. So also the Gifpark has got some attention, media attention, which is also nice for the project, and basically the way how it was until now communicated to the general public was about the existence of this unique Gifpark bacteria that can remediate the contaminants that exist there. But then, of course, this is a simplified version of what actually happens, and the aim of us is to try to explain complex processes in a non-visible environment in a simple way for the general public. And this implies, for instance, that instead of talking about unique bacteria, we want to make a communication transition from unique bacteria to unique microbiome. And this is because it's not only about the bacteria that live there, but also about the genetic material and, of course, the degradation potential that they have to deal with contaminants. So in the light of why is the Gifpark, or why is there a unique microbiome there, one of the first reasons is because the Gifpark is isolated. As I mentioned before, there are these cement bentonite walls around it, and this prevents that there are like external bacteria coming into the Gifpark. But also, it is important to mention that since we are talking about groundwater, we have different redox conditions, and we as humans can only breathe oxygen, but bacteria are way more amazing. So that's why they can use also nitrate and sulfate and other electron acceptors. And even more important is that bacteria are so diverse and have so specialized metabolism that it can not only withstand the pollution, but it can also use this as a food source. And that is what we want to make very clear, that bacteria are there and that we want to use the potential of the indigenous bacteria in the Gifpark. Now, in order to communicate this project, then because we as a scientist don't have such an experience on bringing this type of information to general public, then we first looked for stakeholders association. So for that, we contacted people from the Artis, that it's in Amsterdam, and they also have a museum that is dedicated only to microorganisms, which is called Micropia. I would really recommend to visit it. And the idea is that we will get help from the Artis to develop storytelling for different audiences, to once again describe the underground, and as much as possible bring insights about the microbial world. But together with the storytelling, then we want to use visual aids. So as you can see, the picture that it's there, it belongs to the Artis Museum, and I think that's really attractive. So we would also like to make an installation or to use visual aids that are symbolic but also pertinent and that help us show what we cannot see with our naked eye in a better way. So for that, what we are planning to make is to use the Winogradsky column. So here it's an example, again, from Artis Micropia. And the idea is that these columns are a miniature ecosystem, and these are enriched sediments. And it's a self-sustained and enclosed environment. So basically, once you have the column, you only need to provide light, which is the only external energy source that it has. And then we will be able to see these different layers in the column that resemble what is actually happening in the groundwater. And by observing this, then we can bring up discussions about the biogeochemical cycles, the microbial diversity, and of course, what is more important for the BESTPAR project, the pollutant transformation. Also, since this enclosed environment is changing with time, then I think it also shows how naturally occurring phenomena are changing during time. Besides that, we would also like that the Winogradsky installation is a physical location, and this physical location helps us to connect with regional projects and with educational activities. So I think yesterday we had a very nice presentation about the importance of the living labs, and we would really like to have a similar physical location to discuss about projects and how to involve also people related with education on such projects. And more important, also we have these columns. Now you saw a very big one, but these columns can also be done at home. So this brings hands-on experience. And since we want to communicate with citizens, we are also thinking about the different target groups like kids, for example. And by having their own column, then they can have cooperative learning groups and also different peer discussions. So I think with this, I would like to go to my take-home messages. First is that nature-based solutions can prevent spreading and remediate existing pollution. Also that to make visible the invisible, we require stakeholder association, the use of visual aids, and also storytelling. And finally, that building trust is the base for successful project execution in cities. I also want to promote a workshop that will take place this afternoon with Tim Grottenhaus, who is from the WUR. So if you want to hear more about nature-based solutions in urban areas, you can go to this session in the afternoon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much also for keeping within the time. I will allow one explanatory question. Who has a question for Andrea?
Thank you for the nice presentation. In the column that you want to do, you say you provide light, but in the real situation, there's of course no light.
Yeah.
Does it matter?
Yeah, so the idea of providing light is only until we get the different formation of the layers, because that's the only external source. But in principle, the different layers correspond to different bacteria that already exists in the soil. So it's just like an extra help to help a bit with the visualization. Yeah. But what we want to create are the different redox conditions that resemble what happens in real life.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you again. So our next speaker is next speaker is visiting us from Spain. It's Enrique Castelo. Enrique is actually the instigator of this session. It was his idea to start a session on communication. Welcome, Enrique.
Hi, do you listen to me, Saskia?
Yes.
Ah, perfect. I was suffering because the connection was not working, but thank you, Saskia. And I'll share my presentation. Maybe you are able to see my screen. You should now. So I'll just start. So thank you. Do you see my screen and do you listen me well, Saskia?
Yes, we see your screen. It's suboptimal, but it's we can manage like this, I hope.
So thank you. I'm sorry for not being able to be there. And special thanks to Saskia, to Margot, and to Co Molenaar, to Margot de Kleen and Co Molenaar, for accepting this session. This was a session mostly focused on communication, but also open to other perspectives. Also, yeah?
You have in your screen a box with some orange colors. Can you move to the right or somewhere away? At least?
Now?
Perfect.
Now? Okay. So I'm a bit sad for not be with you, but the idea was to reflect on the notion of resilience and also on the aspect related to nature-based solutions for the next years, and also focusing in this idea of media, of the centrality of the importance of media and social communication, indeed. And first, I would like just to situate, to locate myself in the sense that that is something we social researchers do is to start with your position. I mean, for me, resilience is a social construction, and I relate this idea also with these failed attempts of control we have as societies. And the focus on communication is precisely because in this sort of transformative resilience that we see we need, in a sense, in this sort of three levels that, for example, McWithy and other authors mentioned. We need more, and as we have seen in this previous session, some people were posting that the importance of communication, of education, of social awareness, and here the media and the structure of social media and are really at the center point. So this is the idea, and also the idea that resilience always develops in a specific socio-political context. And in my case, I was been studying media in Spain. I mean, focusing in the press. And well, the Spanish case, I see that there are a lot of Spanish researchers in the Congress. Congratulations also for that. But it is, as any other context, is very particular. And for example, in our case, for decades, the notion or the discourse on the fighting the wildfires was, the discourse of suppression was really hegemonic during decades. I mean, at least up to the end of the 80s, early 90s, that we started to be exposed to different discourse about resilience, mostly from experts like Marc Castelnau and others that started to talk about this. And well, the hypothesis was, a preliminary idea was that during the last 5 years, I was detecting that that this discourse of resilience was more common in the media at large, but obviously we have to learn this and to be more systematic to try to explain how this is happening. And for this, the notion of mediatization was important. So these two notions, framing and mediatization, and I won't talk very much about them, but just to mention that for framing, we can state this idea of making sense of these social issues, processes of social problems, from education to health to criminal aspects or issues, and or environmental in this case, and the notion of mediatization as processes of social transformation, in the sense that media not only are mediating realities, but they are an agent, they are triggering transformation also in institutions. I mean, we have more structures focused on how to better communicate notions, ideas, policies, measures in that sense, focused on the resilience or nature-based solutions. So the research design, I think that maybe Saskia, who is, so thank you so the page will be, you see, we have 3 main newspapers during 5 years. I achieved to finish this ready for the Congress. So we work with pieces like the one you are seeing here, leveling, and using this computer assist qualitative data analysis. This is pretty interesting because you can label, mark, make resumes, make memos. So you see how the discourse is working a long time, and also categorizing with these 2 main frames, suppression and resilience. Here are the subcategories, or the, what are suppression, what are the discourse and the pieces of suppression about? They use a language of fighting. They use also a politicization not in the sense of policies, but sometimes this dispute that has been also researched in Greece and other contexts. They focus on individual causation, like the arsonist, accidents, imprudent behaviors. They normally talk about locals as victims being rescued from the places and so on. So at the other side, we have the resilience with stories focused on nature, on policies, on how to deal with preparing places, properties, and also more complex structural causation. Obviously, there are neutral or transversal elements like risks or damages caused by the fire. So using this, I managed to see how a long time this is working. You see that there are years with more data, with more items about wildfires. Normally, they corresponding to the years with more episodes, but not always. The way media talk and specific aspects of the wildfires, like for example, area, the gravity, the seriousness of the episode, and so on, is very important. We help País with more coverage. And this is the headline of the research, and you see that effectively the hypothesis was right, in the sense that the green band is standing a long time. The green band is resilience stories. Also, with both relevant, we use these 4 categories: suppression, resilience, both are not framed. So I could evidence this, that a long time, and especially during the 2 last years, resilience discourse are more common, at least in this media in Spain, and maybe this is interesting also for other comparisons with other contexts. I have also data about the sources of this discourse. Obviously, fight and extinction as levels are most important for suppression. But for example, for resilience, the important subcode, the important sources, the discourse about the structural causes of the wildfires. And there are other tricky elements. For example, the high agency of locals that I expected to find it more in the resilience part. I see that suppression is like colonizing, is like appropriating this discourse specifically to explain stories about how people in the communities help to fight the fire. This is a word cloud, so you see some of the concepts, important concepts change, but a lot of these concepts are related to global warming. These are the cloud for resilience, so resilience is very much attached to the idea of global warming. And I would like also to mention the importance of metaphors. So the metaphor of firefighting is war is very important. Normally, we don't find the notion of war, but we find all this family of, fighting, combat, flanks, attack, ammunition dump in Spanish, obviously. And on the other side, I found one interesting metaphor by Castellnou that he used during 2 years the notion of low intensity fires as vaccine before COVID-19. Anyway, this metaphor had not more attention and was not working later on. But other authors, like, for example, Tenny Matlock, has been working about the metaphors of wildfires as monsters, I think, in the media in California. I think that this is very interesting also to see how people make sense about what are metaphors. Saskia, maybe you remember this picture. It is from Andalusia. We did this picture together, walking around this place, this area. And challenges on resilience are mostly related to the complexities of this discourse. If you compare it with suppression, which are much more mediated, we need experts, we need to explain in deep how nature can recover, adaptation systems, and so on. Meanwhile, suppression is something very much dramatic with a lot of action, and this is quite a challenge for resilience to take room in the social discourse. And I'm finishing because the time is so tight. Saskia, I hope to be in the time slot, and just to put two ideas on the spot. The first is that this process of mediatization are on their way. We are part of them as scientists, experts, explaining what we refer when we talk about resilience, how we can make sense this for a broad publics, for people at large. It is not easy going discourse. It is not taken for granted and in the media, journalists has an important role here. There are guidelines. Some of them, I mentioned some of them, like this one with, for example, Eduard Plana, who was working about it, guidelines for journalists, storytellers, and communication experts, and also focusing on the specific context at every place. Spain is one. We should do some comparative research. So these are reference. Thanks, Saskia. Sorry for all these telematic issues, and hopefully we can follow.
Thank you, Enrique.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Enrique, for your presentation. It's a pity that we had a bit of bad view of your presentation, but still I have learned.
I didn't listen. You can email me also. I didn't listen the question if there is one.
Concept for a lot of people. What do we need if we want to also have this change in discourse, for example, for other environmental issues, which also ask for more long-term changes?
My God, Saskia, I didn't listen the whole question. I just listened the last 4 words, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it was my mistake.
Okay, sorry, Enrique. My question was about the fact that it's very hard, it turns out from your presentation, to shift the discourse from talking about heroes, combating fires, and making big doing well for the people and their health, towards how can you come to resilience, and how can you also interest people for something which is so hard to imagine, because it's also on a further time schedule. If you have done this research on firefighters, how can you make the change towards finding heroes for resilience?
Thank you. Now, yes, very briefly, I think that there are at least 2 aspects that we should to have in mind. First, is the media logics, in the sense that we know that we are scientists and we like to talk with a certain language and so on, that we have to do efforts in approaching the concepts and so on. So there are some of us experts and so, that we are good. I could be one, but some of us we are able to explain this in a broad sense. Other people, even they don't want to be in the social sphere. I mean, talking in this implies also in Twitter and so on. There are a lot of scientists just, you know, in a bubble of science. This is one. So the efforts from science. And the efforts from media also are very important. You know, media needs some sort of good stories. We have to explain these good stories, and we have to make them easygoing stories also for, I mean, I'm not telling to, you know, do it so much simple. It's not simplifying. It's being able to also to see the elements that are media, you know, the media put on the spot. And for example, resilience is also about, you know, people, it's about animals, it's about biodiversity. I mean, this sort of things, not putting too much drama or spectacularization. This wouldn't be nice, but trying to be really, you know, to explain well the story and make it impactful, socially talking. I think that this is very obvious, but
okay, thank you very much for your response, for your presentation. One more hand for Arik, and then we'll go over to our next presenter. Thank you, Arik. So our next speaker is Catalina Papari. And she will discuss something about the EU taxonomy and how this can help upscaling investments into urban nature-based solutions. So I'm really well curious about this presentation, and
There we go.
okay.
Great. So I can start now. Good morning, everyone. I'm Catalina Papari. I'm a PhD candidate at Utrecht University and KU Leuven during a joint PhD program in sustainable finance and innovation. So I have to say that I'm new in everything that means nature-based solutions and investments into nature-based solutions, but as it has a huge potential to be scaled up from a financial perspective, I'm focusing and I'm trying to burst the bubble and explore also this topic. Today I will present a working paper together with Helen Taxopius and Friedman Pozin, that are professors at Utrecht School of Economics. And they are focusing on investments in nature-based solutions. And with Harriet Bartlett and Eloisa Menguzzo, professors at Durham University and the Geosciences faculty here at Utrecht University. The big question is, can the EU taxonomy help upscale investments into urban nature-based solutions? And I think it's a topic that summarizes a bit the previous discussion with the EU Commission, and also what we discussed a bit yesterday about how we can actually increase the ticket size of a UNBS project, and what is the potential in these nature-based solutions to be scaled up. I'm coming with a part of economics and financial economics, but then we also focus on nature-based database solution, nature investments that are mentioned in a European Commission database of almost 1,000 projects at the EU level. I think it's very good to clarify a bit the terms and to be aware that we are all aligned on the same page. And I would like to ask you if you are aware of what is this EU taxonomy, and if you can raise the hand just saying if you ever heard about it or not. So yeah, about 20% in the room, good. So the EU taxonomy is a policy framework at the EU level that has the role to classify what is sustainable to be investing and what is not. And it's a very short list that is not mandatory, but is voluntary to be considered by investors when they want to proceed with any kind of investment in solutions that will help us transiting in climate adaptation and mitigation. The second big topic of this paper is the upscale. So how we can actually increase the ticket size, so the amount of financial capital towards nature-based solutions, and how we can make them more legible, so readable, and more commensurate at the EU level. So how we can replicate them and these investments in other EU countries across the member states. The last part is the pure investment, and how do we mention investment in this working paper is the pure financial capital in both in projects, project finance, and pure investment. So for example, yesterday we were talking a bit about the EU missions and all the funding put forward by the European Commission in supporting different nature-based solutions. These ones are nice projects, but it does not mean direct funding to NBS. For this, on these three topics, we have this methodological framework, read other way around. So we start, and I will start presenting the current investor landscape of urban nature-based solution. And then we analyze quickly the text of the EU taxonomy, making a very nice, clear visual. And overlapping them, we try to understand what is the potential of the effectiveness of this policy framework, and what is the narrative and the discourse of EU institutions on NBS, and if it is effectively making any change. We all know that urban nature-based solutions are cost-effective, and they implement nature as a way to address different challenges. They foster innovation, employment, and growth, and they address climate adaptation and mitigation, but somehow they are not scaled up. They are stuck in the niche sector because there are some barriers, and there is one of the main barriers is the lack of financial capital, lack of private finance, and difficulties in monetizing the benefits from urban nature-based solutions, so the nature that is implementing in the urban setting. And also the lack of upfront capital that was also mentioned yesterday in many sessions, because basically everything is based on grants that is not sustainable longer term, and also the costs of implementation are very big at the start of the project. There are also ingrained public goods, which again switch the entire attention in finance towards public capital providers. They are on some political agendas, and they compete with other priorities at the national, regional, or local level. And there is also insufficient policy development and lack of standardization, because it's very, in terms of financial instruments, because we know that nature-based solutions are ingrained in the local environment, but financial mechanisms that could support them are much easier replicable. However, with no kind of framework, it's much more difficult to do this. So innovative investment is needed, and according to the literature, there are still embedded, considered as niche. So in this model, we can see the different types of finance according to the phase of innovations, and it wants to explain the diffusion of these innovations through financial mechanisms. However, the top-down approach that is very important in the diffusion of UNBS, it's still the policy framework that is overlapped with the private finance instruments and structures. UNBS is still considered in the previous literature in the demonstration phase. If we want to move something from the demonstration phase to pre-commercial and the more niche market and fully commercial, so to diffuse them across the market, we need much more diversification of financial instruments, and to move forward from the public finance towards private finance, which is also the main narrative of this EU taxonomy, because we need approximately 300,000 billion euros per year until 2030 if we want to reach the climate goals. Now, going on a bit into the Naturvation project, and the second question is, who knows about the Naturvation database? Good. I think it's very interesting to just have a sneak peek into it, because it's a database with more than 1,000 projects. We selected only 997 because there were some missing observations, but it's a project trying to document different case studies across Europe based on a lot of financial data, and at the same time the governance structure that supports different UNBS at the EU level. And this huge database is publicly available, and it was gathered by a consortium of 14 universities under a Horizon 2020 project that lasted 4 years, and the data collection ended in 2020. What does this graph say? Says that the public local authorities support the most number of UNBS, followed closely by public national budget and public regional budget and the EU funds. So all of it is public funding. For the followers, a bit some NGOs, very small size ticket investments from private foundations and crowdfunding. And the biggest ones are corporate investors. We will focus a bit on corporate investors because of their capacity of replicating their investments according to the branches in the countries that they are based. And at the same time, they have a high potential because they have much more capital and bigger ticket sizes than NGOs and private foundations. Again, if we look at this graph with a lot of numbers, the same trend is confirmed, that corporate investors are trying to catch up with the public investors in terms of also ticket sizes. Very few projects above 4 million euros, because UNBS are still supported by small size tickets in smaller initiatives. If we look on the purely at the corporate investor landscape, and we go into the types of nature-based solutions supported, we see that the majority of their fund is going towards external building greens and gray infrastructure with green features, parks, and also semi-natural and urban areas. However, in terms of the financial instruments they use, they are still quite traditional. They go through direct funding and subsidies, and they act as their public fellows, municipalities, and regional authorities. The question is if this type of financial instrument is the one that really works for ENBS or it's something else out there. The last takeaway on this data set is linked on the impact and monitoring disclosure. So if this project mention publicly disclosing the presence of a formal monitoring system, which is linked directly with an impact measurement and management framework. So if they follow the results along the project, or if they disclose any kind of public information on the financial instruments that they use, how the project is implemented, and what is the impact that they want to reach. And as we can see on different type of UNBS, the highest disclosure is on parks, natural and urban green spaces, and blue areas. The same in the presence of formal monitoring system. Even if very few of them disclose, the most ones that disclose are again public, local authorities, and corporate investors. And now we jump quickly on the EU taxonomy, which seems a bit scary, but in 2021, so basically these are 400 pages of the 2 delegated acts just in one picture. We have the mandatory regulation, so the one that really forced private investors to disclose their results. So we have some specific regulations to do this and to standardize them. And then the voluntary one. So basically they can use this list to create commensuration, legitimacy, and legibility. What does this mean? If investor would disclose according to a list of indicators and an impact measurement and management system, it might be much easier to compare the results of their investments and their investment schemes into an NBS to create a readable value of NBS according to each investor, and to put their place in the public discourse at the EU level. What happens in reality is that a lot of a considerable share of UNBS are not even mentioned in the green taxonomy. So external building greens, parks, blue areas, and green areas for water management are mentioned in the delegated acts as being sustainable. The other ones are missing. If we overlap with the investments ticket, we see that exactly the ones that are mentioned attract the highest investment rate. Questioning again, why does this happen? It is just because they are reaching a high ticket size. They are mentioned in a regulatory framework. What's happening with the ones that are lagging behind? Would be a green indoor areas, not that valuable longer term as an external building green is not considered a sustainable investment or not, or it is. So what does the EU taxonomy? A lot of the investment alignment on the ones that are mentioned. It increases the comparison across regions in terms of financial instruments and mechanism use, increase the transparency, which could lead to increased cooperation. However, as not all of them are part of this public discourse, they might lag behind and not receive the legitimacy that they need to have. At the same time, some of the NBS that are not part of this regulatory framework might be even more innovative. However, at this point in time, the regulation could stifle innovation. The drivers of investors are still the public investors. So the question would be how the taxonomy would make the change. And the last one is that potential co-investment might raise out of that. what is interesting is, and would be probably much more relevant for everybody in the room, is that the European Commission is building now on 2 other delegated acts, one on biodiversity and one on circular economy. So maybe there is much more room there. However, the public discourse should be based on science. So it would be nice to contribute. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. Well, I think it's so interesting that maybe someone has one explanatory question, and otherwise I would invite you to go and discuss with Catalina later on in the meeting. Okay, Tim, one short question, please. A derelict area, what is that?
So it's an area that is lagging behind in terms of biodiversity and forest. So it's missing everything that means nature, and it was, yeah, just part of also natural cataclysm, or the nature is just missing on that side.
I think you were surface.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not the earth.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll add to your remark, because people at home cannot hear what you're saying. So Tim wants to underline that also the subsurface should be part of the EU taxonomy on nature-based solutions also, because a lot is happening underneath our feet. So, and we also want to communicate about that. We heard in a former presentation. So now I'd like to thank you, Catalina, and give the floor to Tim. Tim is going to tell us something about a nature-based future for the Netherlands. And okay, it's not for the Netherlands only, because the ideas he's going to share with you might be an inspiration also for other countries and regions. Tim, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Tim van Hattem, Program Leader Green Climate Solutions at Wageningen University and Research. Well, it's quite clear that the world is facing some major challenges, and I think we need new communication strategies to show actually the future we want. And together with a group of 20 researchers, we developed a vision for the future, the nature-based future for the Netherlands, just to give another perspective on the future. And well, if you want to show the world in one picture, I think this picture does the trick pretty well. It shows the world is on fire, and we are still playing a round of golf. We are facing major challenges, but we are running from one crisis into the other. COVID, we have a nitrogen crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have an Ukraine crisis. So we are very busy with short-term problems, and we really need to focus on the long term. And of course, we all know that climate change is the biggest challenge of the 21st century. Well, and we have had 26 climate conferences, and still the carbon emissions are going up and up. And well, when I started to study, if science says 350 parts per million is the safe zone, well, I started studying around this year. Then it was 350 parts per million, and since then it has been going up. So it's not my fault, I hope, but we are in a danger zone, and that's also what climate scientists are saying. Last week there was this message in the news that Dutch climate scientists don't believe anymore in the 1.5 degree. And that, well, is, I think, a very alarming message if scientists start saying these things, because we don't want to spread that news, because that takes the energy out of the action. Well, we know all these pictures, so we have been communicating a lot about climate change with these kind of pictures, and it's happening all over the world. Floods, heat waves, wildfires. Well, it's and we had our own wake-up call in the Netherlands. Was mentioned this morning. Floods in the southern part of our country. And if you ask people, how do you think the future of the Netherlands will look like? 1 in 5 people thinks that our country will look like this. Well, large part of our country is below sea level, and we are getting worried about sea level rise. And of course, we have one more big challenge, and that's loss of biodiversity. And all these challenges make us pretty scared about the future and concerned about where we have to go. Well, the good news is that we actually know what we have to do. That was the good message of the latest IPCC report. It contained a lot of alarming messages, but the good news was that we have the solutions and we know exactly what we have to do. Of course, we have to mitigate our emissions, we have to adapt, but we also have to restore biodiversity. And our main message is that we have to do that in an integrated way. Climate and biodiversity should have an integrated approach. And now it's seen as 2 different problems still, but we need an integrated approach. And there, nature-based solutions come in. So restoration of our soils, our water systems, our forests, our wetlands are the best climate solutions. So we have to invest in these solutions on a very, very large scale. And that was for us the thinking, can we develop a vision for the future of the Netherlands based on these nature-based solutions? How would our country look like when we apply these nature-based solutions on a very large scale? Well, this is a fantastic picture of our country. You see a low-lying delta, densely populated with many, many challenges and vulnerable for the impact of climate change, of course. And we have many actions to take. We have the energy transition. We want to move towards a circular economy. We have a transition in our agriculture, which is a very hot topic today. And we still have to build 1 million houses. And we have to do that all in these very small spaces. We don't, if we lack one thing in our country, it's space. So we really need to think about the long term and to think of how we are going to create our country in the future, how our country will look like. So what we did is, with 20 researchers in the room, we had a research by design approach, a lot of design sessions with maps of the country on the table, and just think of how could our country look like when we take nature-based solution as a starting point. And we decided to not to write a very thick report or a scenario study or something like that. We just made one scenario, a nature-based scenario for the future of our country. And we drew a map, a new map of the future. If you want to know where you have to go, you need a map. So we thought, let's make a map. And we turned the map upside down, just to give another perspective on our country, to show that we need to think in another way and to think in a nature-based way. And we are talking in the Netherlands a lot about water and soil should be the starting point for redesigning our country. Well, this is how our country looks like then, sort of. It's not a plan, it's not a blueprint, but it's just to have discussion about the future we want. And this map contains a lot of information, too much to explain in 12 minutes. But we show that our country contains a lot more space for water, more forest, greener cities, regenerative agriculture, but also a lot of action on the North Sea. And we made some assumptions to create this story. And well, I think that the most important one is that we said, okay, we expect in the year 2120, 100 years from now, well, 98, that the sea level will be 1.5 meters higher than today. And then still our country is not flooded. And we created for every region a region-specific approach based on water and soil as a starting point, the natural system as a starting point. So the clay soils, the sandy soils, the river areas, the coastal areas, they all need a different approach. So we developed all these kinds of approaches for every region. Well, to zoom into some of them, the sea, we said, okay, we will produce much more energy at sea, wind energy, solar energy, floating solar, hydrogen, but we also will produce much more food at sea, mussels, oysters, seaweed. We will let the coast grow with sea level rise. We need new delta works. We need double dike systems, but we also need bigger dunes to protect us from flooding. We also need much more space for rivers, not only in the big rivers, but the situation in Limburg, in the southern part of our country, the floods last year showed us that we also need much more space for the smaller rivers. We want to restore our wetlands, our peatlands, because there's land subsidence together with sea level rise is not a very smart combination. So we really need to think of other forms of peatlands, create them into wetlands again, good for biodiversity, find other ways of agriculture in that areas where you can produce, for instance, bio-based products that can help us with the energy transition. And of course, we need to focus much more on greener and healthy cities, where also our cities will become sponges to reduce temperatures, to accommodate all the excess of rainwater, but especially to create healthy and livable cities. Well, this is in a nutshell our story about the Netherlands 2120. And when we published this story in December 2019, just before the COVID problem started to reach Europe, it was in all the newspapers, our message, our hopeful message for the future we want. It was in the newspapers, we were on TV, and many people were talking about it. We were invited at many places to talk about this narrative, because it was something new. And what we learned about it, and we've been talking to ministries, municipalities, school kids, people from the European Commission, and everything in between. And everybody was very enthusiastic about this way of thinking and looking at the future, because we have been explaining and showing a lot what the problem is, but we haven't been talking that much about where we want to go and how this world looks like where we want to go. So what we learned is that there is a huge need for a narrative of hope based on all the knowledge we have. Well, that's what we created. I think this story is not finished yet, not for the Netherlands, but I think we need this kind of thinking, this kind of visualizing the future, not only for the Netherlands, but I think for every country, for every delta, for every region in the world. The main question everybody asks us is, well, this is a fantastic story. How do we get as soon as possible to the right picture, and why does it have to take 100 years? Well, if you ask me, I think we can do this in much faster, but we need a lot of people for that, and we also need to make it more specific on a regional scale. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think this helps to create, and to start enthusiasm, also create enthusiasm for the action we need. Well, this is my last slide. This picture is coming from the latest IPCC report, and it's showing pathways to the future. And if you ask me, I think we have been investing a lot of time and effort, also as a research community, on the red pathways, the futures we don't want. So, well, if we go to the 3 or maybe more degree warmer world, we move towards this Netherlands flooding picture. But I think we need to show much more and put much more effort in developing narratives that everybody understands towards the future we want, and that's the picture on the right. And I think we all can work on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim, for this hopeful picture of our future. And I wonder whether there are people who have a question for Tim. you're both. Can I have?
I first. Hi, Tim. Again, a wonderful story, but I'm a bit worried about the disconnect in what you see outside today. You said hot topic. I mean, the thing we have with nitrogen and farmers and the resistance in the society, I'm really worried about that. I mean, part of the people think it's a hopeful story, but we don't want to work on the hopeful story. Do you have any idea about how to get there?
Yeah, it's a very important question. So we have I don't know if everybody knows, but we have a big nitrogen problem in the Netherlands. And last week there was presented a map, and not this map, but another map, because this map created a lot of enthusiasm. But the other map didn't create any enthusiasm, because it showed the areas that should have the amount of reduction of nitrogen in that area. And that means farmers need to reduce their livestock and to change their way of farming. But what you hear every day is that what is lacking is a future perspective for the agricultural sector. And because the problem of the agricultural sector in the Netherlands is much bigger than only nitrogen. We also have a water problem, we have a methane problem, we have a climate problem. So what is needed is a totally new narrative about the future of agriculture in the Netherlands. And I think we can make it. And to be honest, it's a little bit this future narrative for agriculture is also on our map. It's not very in detail, but we say we have to produce food within the boundaries of the natural system. And we are absolutely not doing that at this moment. And if we create a story around that, that means we will have less livestock. That's true. But we also need farmers as serving our ecosystem services and getting paid for that. And also getting paid for carbon storage, like we heard this morning. So their income will change, and maybe they will earn more in the future if you have a future perspective of agriculture. And we need to develop that story together with the farmers, I think. And it's not happening at the moment. So yeah. Yeah. Of course, there are good examples. Yeah.
Sorry, there are a few examples of design studios that are conducted together with the farmers. For example, Places of Hope in the Piet area in the northeast part of the Netherlands by the Urban Future Studio from Maarten Haier here in Utrecht.
Yeah.
But there are not many examples. I agree with Tim.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we do not have time for more questions at this moment. But Tim will be here also this afternoon, and I guess also during the lunch break. So now you know who he is. So find him while you are enjoying your lunch and continue the discussion. Thank you very much, Tim.
Okay. Maybe I can share with you also some nice examples. My name is Miriam Hak. I'm a colleague of Tim, and I was very happy that Tim was first, so that I can. Is it good enough? Yeah. Okay. I know that my voice is usually quite not a lot of volume in it, but I would like to proceed from there because I think we have some nice examples to show. Of course, well, you all know about this climate problem, so I don't have to tell you about this. Everyone in this room knows it. And Lilian just mentioned in the west and the north of our country, we do not only have drought and heat and water access, but we also have a problem with salt intrusion and soil subsidence. But so there are many problems there. We all know of all kinds of technical solutions, but this session is about communication, and everybody's talking about transition. Land use changes, how is that possible? But we also need resilient soil and water management, but there's a lot of problems with how do you do this? Society is important, economy is important. We all heard about that already. I want to tell you about some projects we're working on, various projects we work on towards climate adaptation together with stakeholders, because it's very important. Otherwise, you will never get anywhere, I think. We need the inspiring examples, like the beautiful map that Tim showed you, to think of what the future might look like. We have to connect the choices we make now to these long-term goals, and we also need field trials and demonstrations, and somehow we get to get effective strategies. That's what my talk is all about. And we're going to talk about one example. We have many examples, but this is one project. It's called Klimap. You may notice that in Netherlands we spell climate with a K, so that's why it's Klimap with a K. It's for the Dutch sandy soils. And it's a collaboration with a large group of partners. We have research institutes, universities, but also government, regional authorities, provinces, water authorities, national government, but also business partners and farmers as well. So we're in the middle of this project. As you can see, next year we have to come up with results. These are all these partners. We also have an advisory group with drinking water companies in, agricultural organizations, more than in the project already, and nature conservation groups. So that's, yeah. This is the goal. Of course, we will not reach our long-term goals within 4 years, but it's to develop guidelines and tools for this transition that we all are aware of. It's necessary for the sandy soils in this case. There are 3 work packages, and I simply made these 3 bowls because it's overlapping. We have to find a way to address these adaptation pathways that already Tim was mentioning. We work on scenario studies, and we work on experiments and demonstration, and we might call them living labs. Visuals are very important. I also liked Andrea with when she talked about this session already. We asked an artist to make a drawing of our project to help us explain what we are doing and what is necessary. Now, it's Dutch words, doesn't matter, because it's actually the drawing that's important. We're coming from the left from a problem, and to the right, there's a bright future. How do we get there? What we need, of course, nature-based solutions. We need to know all about soil and water and crops and nature areas and forests. But we also have to cooperate, and we need people. It's a very, very important basis for our project. And we have to somehow make a road to that bright future. And the road is yellow, and there's all kinds of gaps and obstacles on that road, and we don't know how this road will really look. We need people to help get the obstacles out and make parts of the road that are still not there, and hopefully all together we can finally get to this bright future by making this path. We do a lot of research, and we have data and experiments, but that's all in there. But the most important thing is the design of the pathways together. And I use this, this nice picture in presentations, and I always ask what's the most important color. And some people said brown because the basis is so important. Of course, it's true. But I think actually the yellow is the most important color because it's about this pathway. And because of the big consortium, it's also the learning together from each other, learning by doing. All right, so this is another picture. It's similar to the picture that Tim already showed. It's from the People University of a project that we work on together as well. To the left, we have our areas, sandy area, where we have streams, and we have agriculture, and we have nature, and we have people there. And this graph showing pathways, it's again the pathways goes to the lowest part of the picture. It's the wrong pathways. We have been focusing on that. We need to somehow find pathways upwards to this high resilience, low risk future. And everywhere we see a group of people standing, there's a decision point, and we have to make decisions all the time, and we do not know the future. There's a lot of uncertainty. But how do we actually explain this? It's a difficult picture. So we made a serious game, and it really helps to understand these pathways and decision points idea. And here are people playing the serious game. And the nice thing you see on the wall, by the way, I noticed it just now, that there's the end picture of this for the sandy soils that Tim showed. It's like we sort of produced this game thinking of how do we get to this future. And then we also know that during these 100 years or 50 years or whenever, you will find various moments where things have changed. Political may have been elections where policy changes, and there may have been disasters like flooding or whatever, all kinds of things, or maybe some solutions that we thought of don't seem to work at all. And so these changes are also important, and people play this game, and at the end they find that they have all produced a different pathway to that beautiful future. And that's exactly what the importance of this game is. At the end, they see that there really are different pathways, and we have to define them together and design them together. This really helps to get people understand this whole idea of designing pathways. Now, this is a little small picture of the areas that we call living labs. We have several areas where we work with stakeholders, farmers, and government and industries. And well, a few examples. Like here, we have designed like the roadmap. There was already a vision there of the future, how it should look like. What do we need, and quantification of the data that you made decisions on. Sorry. And then there's the very difficult example of peat areas, which well, it means now, especially with the nitrate map, that these farmers are really in trouble because they probably have to stop, and there's going to be a real debate about it. But we're still talking with them. And they're going to make some changes, and they have to cope with all these uncertainties. And this is a difficult area in this country. And there's one where we really work on the tools, especially on defining effects of measures for nature and agriculture in the sense of, water retention and everything. And here's a nice example in the north where the farmers are already monitoring themselves. It's called participation. It's very nice. They've monitored all kinds of groundwater levels, but also surface water levels and water quality. And then they realize how difficult it is to obtain these goals, and also what difficulty is for regional water authorities to come up with water management that really works. And it's also about economy and their economy and governance. And there's the last one. This is maybe even the most difficult one. There's a farmer there in that area who has a really futuristic farm. He works with drones, with precision agriculture, and still he uses too much water for irrigation. He still uses too much fertilizer, and we really are talking with these people to find out a future that can work towards this future that we all need. And then we all have all kinds of experiments all over this area. Trying infiltration for water retention, trying adding clay to soils to make them more receptive to water, and producing more water for plants, but also different crops. And that's all the kinds of things we're doing. And it helps because at these experiments and demonstration areas, you can talk with the people and explain what is needed. So this is my last message. It's together with stakeholders, and we have the soil and water as our leading principles. We have to design these pathways together based on future scenarios, and then thinking what to do now. And we think experiments and living labs are very important. So that's an example.
Thank you, Miriam, for your clear, short, and well-focused presentation. I wonder, people here together, some questions? Well, I give you the.
Thank you for your clear presentation. I've got one question, and it's about you state the importance of cooperating on the pathways, but do you also cooperate on the wanted future, the desired future, or is that a sort of given for people who have to cooperate on the pathways?
It should be the same, I think. Yeah, the serious game. We first thought, well, let's make one in the future, and then see, let's work towards that. But in the process, we already noticed that it's also possible to then come up with different futures that are also feasible. So that really helps people understand how to take decisions now and to what end that may lead, and then also maybe already change that future picture. Yeah.
Glad to hear it. Thank you.
Yeah. Because of course this inspiring example, it was what was on the wall, but it's really should be inspiring, but not the only solution, right? There are several solutions. Yeah.
I saw one more question, Lilian.
Very inspiring presentation. Thank you, Miriam. The serious game, what is your Who has to play this?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. We researchers first because they wanted to test it, but then now it's already played with the bestuurders, governors of regional water authorities, the waterschappen, and it really helped them to understand what their problem is. Yeah, yeah. So it could be also with I think maybe there was also already one policymaker from the Ministry of Agriculture. I'm not sure.
Well, I know where
Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, it's lovely to do this, really. We also, what we would like, of course, is to make it not only a board game, but really make it also a visual experience, like showing the future, and it's got more work.
Okay, thank you very much, Miriam. We'll go to our last speaker. She is also in Spain, I think, or not?
I'm not sure. Ah, here she comes. Excellent.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you. If you share your screen, and I can share it for you here also in the
yes
in the system.
Yes, I will share my screen.
And Carmen, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. Just let me first share the screen so I don't know. Okay, can you see it? It should be now with the first slide.
I think it's working now. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Carmen Rodriguez. I'm indeed from Spain, and I am a researcher at the European Forest Institute in the governance program in Bonn. And I'm also doing my PhD at KU Leuven in the frame of the project Paralife, which is an innovative training network. So here what I'm going to do is to present a little bit an overview of the second chapter of my research, which is it's a case study in Valencia, in Spain, in the eastern side of Spain, about and what I'm trying to do here is to give a different perspective to the wildfire issue in what I call to have our territorial perspective. So if you tell me that the screen is fine, I think I will just jump right in.
Screen is fine. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, great. So first, because I don't really know how much you know about the wildfire issue, and in particular in Mediterranean Europe, I will go a little bit into it. So wildfires are actually an essential ecological component of Mediterranean ecosystems, and we can see this on these pictures that I put on the right, how it has driven evolution for autochthonous plants, how they regenerate after fires. Also, Mediterranean climates are characterized by cool and wet winters, which stimulate field growth. Basically, this allows the plants to grow, and also warm and dry summers, which dry this vegetation and increase flammability of the ecosystems. Also, it's coupled with a long-term human presence in the whole Mediterranean basin that has been using fire as a management tool for things like regeneration of pastures, agricultural burns. So all of this makes wildfire a very not only social and not only ecological issue. So this is something that is very important to keep in mind when thinking about wildfires. However, it is also true that times are changing. This means that climate change is changing species composition in many ecosystems, and therefore the fire regime. How climate change affects the fire regime, though, it depends on where we are. So if we are in an area that is already dry, the fire risk will increase if the precipitation increases, because this will allow more plants to grow, basically. So we will have more fuel available. If we have an area where traditionally has rained, and we can think about Central Europe, for example, longer or more intense dry periods, will make all this vegetation that is already there more ready to burn, because the humidity will be lower. In addition, we also have land use changes and socioeconomic changes, and I'm going to talk more about the case of Spain. And for this, I put down a set of 3 pictures. It's a very linear relationship. It's not like that, but I think it helps, especially for those less familiar with the whole rural population and land abandonment phenomena that's happening in Southern Europe. So basically we see less and less people in rural areas abandoning primary sector activities, and then this will increase the spontaneous forest regrowth. And we must also keep in mind that Mediterranean forests are very have a very low profitability. So basically, no one is really managing these forests. So, and then what we have at the end is this: what happens after a fire. So all of these together, all these changes are leading towards a very high occurrence of extreme wildfire events. This is something that it doesn't really have a commonly agreed upon definition, but we can think of these events as surpassing firefighting capacities. So it means firefighters cannot do anything because these fires are very strong, very intense. And they also cause very large socio-ecological damages and sometimes even fatalities. So this is also the reason why wildfires are increasingly being handled or thought of as a civil protection issue instead of an ecological disturbance. So with all of this, we encounter what I call the wildfire resilient territories imperative. So the call for building resilient territories is increasing, especially in the face of wildfires, and it's a major policy objective right now in Europe and probably also across the world. Resilience approaches have been widely used both in research and practice. It's I consider resilience to be a quite a useful term because it helps the dialogue between these both worlds and also across disciplines. However, it's also true that the term has received criticism, and this is also that we need to remember when we work with resilience theories. So it has been classified as a buzzword, empty of meaning. It has also been, especially from social science scholars, as a value laden who gets to define what is and what is not resilient. It also pays very little attention to power dynamics and social change, for example, or ethical issues as well. And also some scholars have criticized that it's very strongly rooted in systems thinking. And the problem with systems thinking is that it looks or it contemplates what's the outcome or how the whole system works. But when this is applied to the social realm or to the social fabric, we find that we might be overlooking isolated situations or specific members of the system, which would be the society, and therefore maybe overlooking situations of injustice, for example. So even though wildfires are increasingly being recognized as a complex socio-ecological issue with multiple ramifications, as I only could see some of the two or three previous presentations, but wildfires were mentioned as part of the challenges we're facing worldwide in the very near future, and yet they're still being studied from a very linear or mechanistic perspective. We're looking at the drivers, we're looking at the ignitions, and how to mitigate or remove these as much as possible. We're looking at, of course, how to handle the emergencies, and also at the impacts, how to minimize the impacts in our territories. However, this very linear way of thinking may be hindering the progression towards more adaptive futures, and this is what I'm suggesting here. This is the gap that I'm trying to address. So with this, the research objective that I have in this paper, and that is also underlying a little bit the whole thesis, is to try and understand wildfires as a territorial process. So what I do here is to explore the different territorial elements and dynamics which contribute or hinder the resilience building process in Mediterranean fire-prone territories, in this case specifically the region of Valencia, which you can see here on the map on the right. So I do two things mainly in the paper. First is to develop a conceptual framework that is both territorially embedded and socio-politically sensitive for the reasons I just described, for assessing wildfire resilience in fire-prone territories. And then I apply this analytical lens to the fire-prone territory of Valencia, which all of it is high, is considered as with a very high risk of wildfires, in order to operationalize the above and discuss how resilience is being constructed in this area. So, sorry, a little bit of the analytical framework. I will try to go quickly, and then if there's questions, I will be happy to answer. So the notion of socio-ecological resilience is the most widely used term when dealing with socio-ecological issues. And when I say the most widely used term, I'm trying to differentiate the different engineering resilience, community resilience, ecological resilience. So when dealing with wildfires, we're mainly seeing the use of socio-ecological resilience. So what we, in this paper, what I do is to build upon a socio-politically sensitive understanding of this socio-ecological resilience, which I developed in a previous paper. And which I will highlight just a few aspects, because of course it will be a bit long to explain what all of this implies. But I understand it as a continuous and dynamic process, so something that is never fully achieved, so to speak, and also that it's grounded in principles of social justice and equity. So it has to be aligned with sustainability principles. The relationship between sustainability and resilience is a very hot topic and an ongoing debate in academia, but for the purpose of my research, I consider sustainability as a broader goal, let's say, and resilience as a tool or as an ability that we need to achieve this sustainability. So how I built this socio-politically sensitive understanding of resilience is through bridging resilience thinking to social innovation theory. And basing on the definition by Molaert, but I will again skip this a little bit quickly. And I will go a little bit deeper into the definition I'm trying to put forward of what is actually a fire-prone territory, because this is something that we, in wildfire research, is often just assumed that a fire-prone territory is the geographical space where wildfires occur. But actually, if we look a little bit more in detail in human geographic contributions, we see that it's a lot more than that. And if we take up these, and if we define fire-prone territories using these contributions, there is a lot more dynamics and interactions that arise. So for me, or in this paper, I define a fire-prone territory is the geographical space where socio-ecological relations crystallize, where discourses are reproduced and materialized and competing value systems coexist. It is also a bounded space, which could be politically, but also emotionally or ecologically. And it's also the product of social and power dynamics over time. And then bringing contributions also from the socio-ecological systems literature, it's continuously dynamic and ever-changing. And there's a continuous interplay and feedback loops between micro level and macro level dynamic. So with all of this, what does it mean to have a territorial approach to wildfire resilience? So I try to put this in simple words, and I will be happy to hear your comments on this. But it means to engage more deliberatively within a consideration of wildfires as a territorial process. And to illustrate this, I took this picture on the right of a study on land uses and land conflicts in the region of Valencia. Which goes from the Mediterranean, from the sea to the inland zone. And all of these small letters that I don't know if you get to see, but it doesn't really matter. All of these are different land use conflicts, and fires is only what I highlighted in yellow. So there is really a lot more going on that we're not looking at when we're trying to fix the issue of wildfires. This approach, this territorial approach also implies an understanding that wildfires are tightly interlinked to demographic, economic, metabolic, and power fluxes. And when I mention metabolic, I think it's very important to, at the end of the day, think that wildfires are nothing but a liberation of energy. So the more intense these wildfires is because this energy was previously used or put elsewhere, and now we're not putting it anywhere. So eventually nature releases it. And of course, multi-scalar configurations of governance and institutional structures. So I think I am not keeping track of my own time, but I want to go just quickly over the results. I will skip the methodology. This is qualitative research. These are the locations.
Carmen, sorry.
How long?
You only have 1 more minute.
Perfect. Yeah. So just I have 2 quick slides for the results. So one important thing that I wanted to highlight is a very clear distinction between the rural and urban gradient. so there is a very high consensus that wildfires are an issue that requires action, but which actions does this require? This is what is a very highly heterogeneous. So we can see on the left that wildfires are interpreted as being as a consequence of marginalization, a byproduct of city life or modern lifestyles. And in their discourses, you can hear all the time how they are considered as part of the wider issue of land management or lack of resources or things like that. Whereas if we go more to the policy arena or to the cities, wildfires are more in the discourse they're a problem on its own right. And they're a threat to ecosystems and landscapes, but you don't see so clearly the link to how the economy is organized, for example. So it's more it's more in a silos, let's say. And in regards to the governance systems, so one very important thing is the excessive complexity that we have, which is we call it a trap, a rigidity trap in resilience literature, in resilience terminology. So these very high bureaucratic complexities hinder very much the potential for innovation, and also hinders the lack of hinders the coordination among different ministries and public administrations. And then also the fire governance and management options that we find mostly respond to this urban vision, needs and values of the wildfires. And one thing that also caught my attention that is very important, it's to see how greatly disconnected rural development actors and forestry are. They operate in the same spaces, they know that each other exist, but they don't know each other, they don't go to the same conferences, they don't have each other's addresses. So I think this is something I don't really have an explanation for, but it really caught my attention. And then finally, the lack of local governments and municipalities to implement initiatives that might be not so costly, but they just don't have the people or the funding, or if in order to get it, they need to go to so much bureaucracy that's just not worth for them. So this is it. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thanks very much. And sorry for that. I think I've gone a bit too quickly.
Thank you, Carmen.
So thank you very much, Carmen, for your impressive research and sharing it with us. I wonder whether there are some explanatory questions for Carmen. Well, Carmen, I think everybody wants to have some lunch, but before I let them go to lunch, I have a question for you, because you made quite an analysis, and in the end you also state that there's still a lot to be done. And after your analysis, especially on government side, you see a lot of things have to happen. There's a big gap between policy for the urban regions and for the rural regions. This is a communication session. So what can you do as a researcher to help set up communication and awareness so that at least this subject gets further?
So I think as a researcher, my latest little obsession, as I like to call it, it's to really highlight to both natural and social scientists that resilience is not a neutral concept, that when we talk about a resilient future, we're talking at a very specific way of doing things, and that this may or may not be considering everybody's voices. I popped in quickly yesterday to the fire session, and one of the and people seemed to be very angry because they were saying that the public opinion is wrong, and we need to teach them what is right, and because this is and public opinion is not wrong. Public opinion is. And also, even with among scientists, what you should do before or after fire, this is also very, very tricky. And there's also some things that are also simply just not politically correct to say. And when I'm coming from a country in which our Ministry of Environment, it's also of the demographic transition or demographic challenge, because we have the empty Spain concept. And we have villages that are like 10 people. And there is a big wave of people and movement trying to save these small villages, and maybe that's just not possible. Maybe we need to focus on keeping a good standards of living in municipalities that are 10,000 people, or at least 1,000 or 5,000. But this is politicians cannot really say this out loud. So I think there's really a lot of things in play, and looking at wildfires as one thing when they're actually the symptom of something a lot bigger. It's very tricky, and also well, yeah, that's it, a lot of things. So that would be the one, probably. Like we need to be very careful when we talk about resilience to wildfires.
Okay, thank you very much, Carmen. I think with your study, it's actually very good information to start a discourse, and I think that the way you explained the whole system will help also to build awareness and well, get things going. I wish you good luck and thank you. Bye bye. So everybody here, you're welcome. Thank you for attending the session, of course, and I hope you enjoyed it. We had very different talks, and I think a lot of inspiration has been flowing around. So